The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Claire Curran.
Mr. Speaker, in 2008 this government was elected on a promise, a fairly big promise. It was number 2 on their pledge card to the New Zealand public, and it was to deliver ultra-fast broadband to 75% of New Zealanders in their homes in 10 years for $1.5 billion.
Order.
The national government is pushing through this bill because it wants to satisfy that election promise, a promise that shouldn't have been made, can't be delivered, and can only be met by selling the law, which is what it's done. This minister has spent 2.5 years trying. This was after he cut the previous Labour government's digital strategy, which set out clearly a vision for New Zealand's future as a digital economy and how broadband would be incorporated. Despite this lack of vision from the minister, he has not at any stage requested analysis or advice from the Treasury or the Ministry of Economic Development on the benefits and costs of this bill. Even the ACT Party couldn't understand that. Roger Douglas was quite right to say that, quote, this bill has been driven by a political imperative rather than an economic one, unquote. Labour believes that New Zealand's digital environment requires high-speed broadband across urban and rural New Zealand, delivered in a realistic time frame at an affordable cost and in a competitive market. Before the last election, there was a plan in place and there was solid policy around progressing it quickly, and there's more coming. This bill before us today does none of that, and that's why we're opposed to burdening all Kiwis with this flawed legislation. Labour would have approached the fibre rollout in urban areas differently. The process has lacked transparency, it's full of gaps and holes, and we don't believe that the full costs and impacts have been made public. The interests of investors and corporates have been put ahead of the interests of New Zealand consumers and of strong and vigorous competition in this new and emerging network industry. There's been a lack of public and cross-party consultation. The window for public submissions was very short, making it nearly impossible for detailed submissions to be made, considering the complexity of this legislation. The negotiations with Telecom have been shrouded in secrecy. We're yet to find out the real details of Telecom's structural separation. It's a huge change. But by the time we do find out, it'll be too late to do anything about it and to have public scrutiny and discussion. The bill will have become law. Secrecy, dubious decision-making and the marginalisation of the democratic parliamentary process seem to be the theme of this bill. What we do know about it is that it will create an uncompetitive market that could entrench Telecom 2 and Chorus 2 as the dominant players at the infrastructure, wholesale and retail levels in the New Zealand fibre market. Telecom's history of monopolistic behaviour will not change when it's broken up under the structural separation, especially now that the Minister has guaranteed it that any costs incurred by Commerce Commission regulation will be borne by the taxpayer, an indemnity to Telecom. That is truly selling the law. What incentive will this give Telecom to behave competitively? What incentive will it give the Minister to regulate when the Crown will be bearing the cost? Once again, the Minister is proposing law that just won't work, law that will increase the cost to this consumer while creating an anti-competitive market. There were only minor definitional changes made during the drafting of this bill. It was only after huge opposition from Labour MPs and the telecommunications industry did he concede that the major component of his bill, the 10-year regulatory holiday, had to be changed in order to receive enough support from the government partners and to receive grudging support from the industry. And when the amendment was tabled in the House, we see other changes that are new and very late and put up without the possibility of discussion. This is the Minister who didn't know earlier this week that under his watch, New Zealand's broadband performance has seriously declined in relation to other countries since his government took power. OECD statistics show that monthly prices in New Zealand have slipped from 7th cheapest to 4th most expensive since 2008. We've gone from 12th to 21st for download speed and 12th to 24th for connection speed since his government took power. He obviously doesn't keep tabs on New Zealand's international competitiveness, but he's blindly insistent on ramming through an anti-competitive law which hands a large amount of money to Telecom. We also know that this bill will be forcing prices up for urban users, despite what he says, through the averaging of unbundled copper pricing. While these users wait for fibre, which, as the Minister himself has said, could take at least until the end of 2019, even later for many New Zealanders, they'll be paying more for the broadband services that they receive now. Is that fair? At a time when household budgets are most stressed. We shouldn't be surprised. This is classic behaviour from a national government that is out of touch with the average Kiwi. And now, only a few days ago, an amendment from the Minister which appears to be doing away with the Kiwi share obligation for Telecom. Not only did the Minister spring this upon us at the last minute, but essentially opens up part of the separated Telecom up to full foreign control. The old restrictions on foreign ownership will no longer apply to the retail arm of the split-up Telecom, and the Kiwi share obligations will be split between Telecom and Chorus. Where that split will be, what the implications are for the New Zealand consumer is unclear, and he won't tell us, and there's no chance for public scrutiny. Labor had a plan that would have been well on the way to completion by now. We want a high-tech economy run on ultra-fast broadband, to use technology to improve the responsiveness of government, to ensure that all users, whether they're rich or poor, rural or urban, have access to the latest broadband services, and to ensure that those services are provided as cheaply as possible in a competitive market. It is a shame that this government and the Telecommunications and IT Minister don't agree with those principles. But this government doesn't care for the average New Zealander. They only care for those with money while doing deals. And that's why Labor opposes this bill. We'll repeal the worst parts of it when we return to government. We will review it and restore regulatory oversight. The Commerce Commission will have full powers to examine the contractual arrangements between the Crown and private investment. As would happen in the normal course of events, any consequences arising from this would be borne by the parties concerned. Mr. Speaker, one of the things missing from this debate is the reason why people will connect to fibre, to high-speed broadband. And it seems that Stephen Joyce, the Minister, in his obsession with fulfilling the election promise that couldn't be fulfilled with that amount of money, and devising a deeply flawed connection scheme, left that bit out. Build it and they will come, was his argument. Well, will they? Content, Mr. Speaker, is the important issue. Demand, what people can use the high-speed broadband connections for, and what would motivate them to switch from copper to fibre. Stephen Joyce isn't interested in a bigger vision, and he's strangely silent on any consideration of how the content industry fits into it. The traditional broadcasting sector is transforming and merging with what has been described as the telecommunications and ICT sector. Increasingly, content in the digital environment crosses technological platforms. Traditional broadcasting, as we know it, is now rapidly becoming obsolete. It's called convergence, but we haven't heard him talk about this. New Zealand's new broadband network will only be successful if people choose to access it and see its potential for the future. And to do that, they need access to quality and diversity of content from both within New Zealand and without. And New Zealand's broadcasting sector currently doesn't encourage competition, and it lacks that important public television broadcasting function. The current commercial market framework isn't delivering that as it lacks a publicly funded component. And our concern is what's coming next. We've got a dominant player being set up in the fibre industry to deliver the infrastructure with virtually a free pass to price gouge its way through the next decade. Are we going to see a bigger monopoly in the broadcasting sector be given a gold-plated distribution channel into people's homes? Because if that's the future for broadcasting fibre delivery in this country, a Telecom Sky partnership then today is a truly sad day for this nation.
I call the honourable member